Well, everyone, the iPhone 11 Pro is easily one of the best phones that Apple has ever made, and it's probably still one of my most favorite iPhones of all time as well. So let's go and give a little bit of a breakdown on how this iPhone still holds up in 2023, whether it's still worth buying or if it's not worth buying, and kind of seeing what's changing, this year and kind of what changed with it last year. Now, if you want to pick up this phone, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone 11 Pro, this iPhone on the front has that 5.8-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It had a fairly high resolution at the time. It's still a fairly high resolution. You have the notch up top, bezels around it a little bit, and overall, it's still a very good looking phone. It was one of the last 5.8-inch iPhones of this type of, Pro series that Apple made. And I still like it, I think it definitely looks very good. When I compared this display against the iPhone 15s, I'm going to be honest, I do think there's still a lot of overlap. And I still think a panel like this compares very, very well against something like the iPhone 15. The only slight disadvantage is a couple things. One, dynamic island. There's no dynamic island on this thing. And at least compared to the iPhone 15, it doesn't have as bright of a display compared to that phone. But regardless, I still think the iPhone 11 Pro looks like a very good iPhone. And I'm a massive fan of the way this iPhone looks in this day and age. On the bottom side, you do have that lightning port, which is very good. Having a lightning port in this phone is good. USB-C would have been better, but, totally okay. You can still do a lot of things with lightning, and I'm still perfectly fine with this type of, lightning charger. On the side, one thing I actually like about this phone is the curved side. We've since gotten basically the flat sides, which I maybe like a little bit more, but I feel like with the curved side, it kind of gives me this more like unique approach. I feel like most phones nowadays are more flat than not, but I do like kind of having a curved display sometimes, but the flat displays or flat sides are more modern, but this one still looked pretty good. On the back side, we do have the frosted glass back, which looks very good. The look and feel of this phone is amazing, and I definitely like the way this thing looks from that specific perspective, which is really good. And now that all iPhones have frosted glass backs, this iPhone definitely stands well against even the iPhone 15s, to be honest. You are getting a triple camera setup on the top left corner. You're getting wireless charging, you're getting MagSafe, you're getting IP certification, no MagSafe on this particular phone. But overall, it's a very good, modern feeling phone that does have some, unique, outdated, older type of features, like the notch and the curved sides and everything. But I definitely do think this is still a very good looking phone. I'm a massive fan of the iPhone 11 Pro, if you couldn't already tell. And I definitely do think a phone like this holds up very well against phones like the iPhone 15, at least from the hardware exterior perspective. So from that specific perspective right there, that kind of covers it up right there. Now, in terms of the camera side of things, this is also kind of an interesting thing. So this is a triple camera setup on the backside, a 12 megapixel wide, 12 megapixel telephoto, then a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and then a 12 megapixel wide angle lens on the front. Now you're getting 4K at 60 on the front and the back of this particular phone, which is very good. I like having that, camera setup on the front and the back of this thing, which is beautiful. And the thing I like about this camera is that you are getting almost the same type of hardware cameras as a 15 Pro. Of course, the wide telephoto ultra wide lens, but clearly the 15 Pro is a much better camera, higher megapixel count, more features, everything like that. But with the 11 Pro, you're still getting the kind of the same, at least hardware kind of stuff, which is kind of nice. When I used my iPhone 11 Pro back in 2019 up until 2020, I love this camera. It was the first time I had a phone with a triple camera setup, and I was so happy to have this type of phone because being able to zoom in and zoom out with that ultra wide lens was so nice. Of course you can zoom in, zoom out before, but having the ability of zooming out and zooming in as much as you could on this type of phone was very cool. And this was the first iPhone with an ultra wide camera. So that was another very awesome thing going on for this particular device. Now, the only cons I would say with this particular phone is one compared to the 15s, you are getting a little bit more of a grainier camera. So the quality of the images aren't going to be as good or as sharp as something like an iPhone 15. And you are missing out on some cooler features that we have nowadays on some of the newest iPhones. Things like cinematic mode and the Apple ProRes RAW, all those other things. You're probably not going to care about it too much, but it is kind of a nice feature to have on some of these newer iPhones, which is another really, really cool thing. So that in and of itself is another awesome thing going on there. And I will definitely tell you on the exterior, the iPhone 11 Pro hardware-wise on that camera gets a thumbs up from me. I think it's a pretty good camera when it comes down to it. So, of course, it's not perfect, but it gets the job done for sure. In terms of that kind of covers it up there. In terms of software, so this was an interesting change that happened last year, which is probably still going to end up happening this particular year. So basically what ended up happening was with the iPhone 11 Pro, this particular phone last year with iOS 17, kind of didn't get all the features that the iPhone 12 Pro got. So that was kind of a sad, concerning thing because before, basically every single iPhone before this, with the iPhone 11 Pro, it got almost all the features that iPhone, that iOS software brought. but last year the iPhone 12s were the cutoff point. So this basically means that with this version of the device, you were basically not getting all those cool features in iOS 17. Now this is kind of a sad thing because the iPhone 11 Pro was a really good phone. It was, the first Pro iPhone basically, that Apple made. But now that this iPhone isn't really getting all the features on iOS, in general, it's going to make it very sad for the rest of its lifespan. It's still good that this phone is still getting supported and it's still getting all the a lot of core features on these next versions of iOS, but it's going to be very limited compared to something like an iPhone 12, even compared to the iPhone 13 now. So take that as you will. Another thing, this iPhone pretty much was third in place of getting drop support early last year. Now a year later, this phone is kind of second in place when it comes down to the years of these iPhones being made. So that can be another concerning, sad thing, because if you wanted an iPhone that's going to last a longer time, now this iPhone, maybe it'll get another 2 versions of software, but after that, that's pretty much it. And we're going to be kind of stuck on to see kind of what we're going to be doing after. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. In terms of the performance inside, the iPhone 11 Pro has that Apple A13 bonded chip inside of it with 4GB of RAM. Now, the thing I like about the iPhone 11 Pro is that the chipset and with the RAM, combination, it's a pretty good, combination. It's a pretty good, performing device. Again, it's not perfect by any means, but it's a very good performing device, and that's something I like a lot about this particular phone. With the Apple A13 bonding chip, that's a pretty good, strong chipset to have inside of a device like this. Now, again, it's not perfect by any means, but I do think that if you're wanting to go ahead and just quickly, get a phone that can last quite a bit of time, this is a very good performing phone from that particular perspective, which is something that I actually like a lot. Now, it also has 4GB of RAM, which is another very big thing. So once again, this in and of itself gets a thumbs up from me, because having a phone like this with that type of RAM, with that type of chipset, it's a very good performing device, and that's something I actually like a lot. Now, when compared to something like the iPhone 15, again, it's not as good as something like that. That's just kind of what happens, but it is still a very good phone. And I definitely would say from basic applications to even more intensive stuff, you're going to be getting a really decent performing device from this. There's really nothing I can complain too much about. Maybe the lack of promotion, maybe if this thing had a little bit more RAM and maybe a better chipset. But then we're talking about the iPhone 15 Pro. So this thing, for what you're paying for at the cost, I think is totally respectable. I also think the battery life was really good when I had it, but then it started getting kind of weird, probably on iOS 14 towards iOS 15. So again, just keep that in mind. I think it's still a good battery life, and 3046 mAh battery. It's a pretty big size battery for sure. But I definitely would say with something like this, it definitely is a very decent performing battery life for how old this phone is and everything. But keep in mind that this is definitely going to be kind of like a different type of battery now that we have bigger size batteries and more optimized phones and everything like that too. So to kind of sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you is, I definitely do think a phone like the iPhone 11 Pro is a very good iPhone. I like this iPhone a lot, and I still think it's completely worth buying. If you have the money though, I think jumping up to not the 12 Pro but the iPhone 13 Pro would probably make a lot more sense for me to kind of recommend to people. I think the iPhone 13 Pro was such a solid phone, and I think that is a very good upgrade coming from something like the iPhone 11 Pro. So without a doubt, that kind of is how I see it here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.